The long road home. The moments after the assault stretched into a haze of pain and disbelief. Marcus leaned against the truck, his head throbbing, his cheeks stinging where Hensley's fist had landed. The blood on his face felt warm against the cool night air, but the physical pain paled in comparison to the emotional wound. He had been attacked while honoring a fallen brother, a man who had given his life for his country. The betrayal cut deeper than any blade. Hensley stood over him, his chest heaving, his face a mix of triumph and uncertainty. For a fleeting moment, doubt flickered in his eyes, as if he sensed the gravity of his actions. But it passed quickly, replaced by a hardened resolve. "You think you can fool me with your stories?" he spat, pointing an accusing finger at Marcus. "I know your type." Marcus's mind reeled. His type? A soldier? A man of honor? Or something else, something uglier that Hensley saw in the color of his skin? He forced himself to speak, his voice trembling but resolute. "That casket holds Private Daniel Ruiz," he said. "A soldier who died for this country. I'm bringing him home. You're dishonoring him right now." The words hung in the air, heavy with truth. The flag-draped casket, illuminated by the cruiser's headlights, seemed to demand respect, but Hensley ignored it. "Don't try to manipulate me," he growled, reaching for his handcuffs. "Turn around. Hands behind your back." Marcus's heart sank. "You're arresting me?" he asked, incredulous. "For what? Doing my duty?" But Hensley was beyond reason, his actions driven by something Marcus couldn't comprehend. As the officer twisted his arm again, pain shot through Marcus's shoulder. But something else stirred within him, not anger, but resolve. "You'll regret this," Marcus said quietly, his eyes locking onto Hensley's. "This isn't about me. It's about respect. For Daniel, for the uniform, for what we stand for." For a moment, Hensley hesitated, caught off guard by Marcus's calm defiance. But the moment passed, and he tightened the cuffs around Marcus's wrists, shoving him toward the cruiser. Clara, still recording, felt a surge of determination. She met Marcus's gaze as he was led away. Nodding slightly to assure him that she would not let this go, the crowd around her murmured, some in shock, others in anger. The flag on the casket fluttered in the breeze, a silent rebuke to the chaos below. The ripple effect. The drive to the precinct was a blur. Marcus sat in the back of Hensley's cruiser, his wrists aching from the tight cuffs, his mind replaying the night's events. The injustice gnawed at him, but so did his promise to Daniel. He had sworn to bring his friend home with dignity, and now that mission felt tainted, violated by a man who should have been an ally. At the precinct, Marcus was placed in a stark holding cell, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. His cheek throbbed, his body ached, but his spirit refused to break. He thought of Daniel's family, waiting for their son, unaware of the nightmare that had unfolded. He thought of Clara, a stranger who had chosen to stand up for him, and he clung to the hope that this wasn't the end of his story. Outside, Clara was already at work, her hands still shaking. She uploaded the video to social media, her caption simple but powerful: "A soldier beaten while escorting a fallen hero home. Justice must be served." Within minutes, the post began to spread, igniting a firestorm of outrage. Comments flooded in, some from veterans, others from strangers moved by Marcus's plight. By morning, the video had reached thousands, and the story was no longer confined to a lonely gas station. Witnesses began to come forward. A truck driver who had stopped for coffee described Hensley's aggression, his voice heavy with disgust. A young mother recounted Marcus's calm demeanor, his repeated attempts to explain his mission. The evidence was undeniable, and the public's anger grew. When news reached Daniel's family, their grief turned to fury. Maria Ruiz, Daniel's mother, spoke to reporters through tears. "My son gave his life for this country," she said, "and the man bringing him home was attacked. How can we trust anyone to honor our heroes?" Clara, undeterred, drove to the precinct at dawn, demanding to see Marcus. The officers tried to dismiss her, but her persistence wore them down. When she finally saw Marcus, his bruised face and weary eyes broke her heart. "I recorded everything," she told him. "People are standing up for you. You're not alone." Marcus's eyes glistened with gratitude. "All I wanted was to bring Daniel home," he said softly. Clara nodded. "Let us help you carry that burden." Redemption and healing. Hensley reached out to Marcus through his lawyer, requesting a meeting. Marcus, encouraged by Clara, agreed to meet in a quiet park. The encounter was tense, but Hensley's sincerity was unmistakable. "What I did was wrong," he said, his voice breaking. "I failed you and Private Ruiz." Marcus listened, his heart heavy but open. "You hurt more than just me," he said. "You hurt everyone who believes in what we fight for." After a long pause, he added, "I forgive you, but you need to prove you've changed." The handshake that followed was a fragile bridge between two men scarred by the same moment. Hensley resigned from the force and began volunteering, determined to rebuild his purpose. Marcus, meanwhile, continued his journey, arriving in Daniel's hometown to a hero's welcome. The community lined the streets, honoring both Daniel and Marcus with flags and signs. At the funeral, Marcus spoke with raw emotion, calling Daniel his brother and urging the crowd to honor him with love, not anger. Maria Ruiz clutched the folded flag. Her gratitude for Marcus unspoken but profound. That evening, Marcus joined Clara and others for a candlelit vigil, a moment of closure and hope. A lasting legacy. In the weeks that followed, Daniel's story became a symbol of resilience and unity. Maria started a scholarship fund in his name, while Marcus spoke at events, emphasizing forgiveness and growth. Clara continued her advocacy, pushing for police reform. Hensley, through his volunteer work, began to rebuild trust, one small act at a time. Years later, Marcus reflected on his journey. "It's not about moving on," he said. "It's about carrying the past in a way that makes you stronger." Daniel's legacy lived on, not just as a fallen hero, but as a beacon of hope, proving that even in darkness, light could prevail through courage, forgiveness, and the will to do better. The weight of injustice. The gas station, bathed in the harsh glow of Hensley's cruiser headlights, felt like a stage where an unseen drama was unfolding. Shadows stretched across the cracked pavement, twisting and shifting as if mirroring the chaos about to erupt. Marcus stood by the pump, his military ID still in hand, his posture rigid but non-threatening. He was trained to de-escalate, to maintain composure under pressure, but nothing in his training had prepared him for this. Hensley's voice cut through the night like a blade. "What are you doing out here, really?" he demanded, his eyes narrowing as they darted between Marcus and the truck. The casket, draped in the American flag, should have been a symbol of reverence, a silent testament to sacrifice. But to Hensley, it was just another piece of the puzzle that didn't add up. "I'm escorting a fallen soldier, sir," Marcus repeated, his voice steady despite the growing hypothetical question. If Marcus had lied about his mission, would Hensley have believed him? The thought flickered through Marcus's mind, absurd and infuriating. "It's official, sir," he said, gesturing toward the truck. "I have the paperwork if you need to see it." But Hensley wasn't interested in paperwork. Something about Marcus, his race, his uniform, or perhaps just the late hour, had triggered a visceral reaction. "You expect me to believe that?" Hensley snapped, stepping closer. "What's really going on here?" Marcus's stomach churned, but he held his ground. "I'm telling the truth, sir. This is my duty." His words were calm, measured, but they only seemed to fuel Hensley's aggression. In a flash, the officer grabbed Marcus's arm, twisting it behind his back with a force that made Marcus wince. "On the ground!" Hensley shouted, shoving him forward. Marcus stumbled, his knees scraping against the pavement. Pain shot through his legs, but he bit back a cry, refusing to give Hensley the satisfaction. "Sir, please," he said, his voice low but firm. "I'm not a threat. I'm just bringing a hero home." But Hensley's eyes were wild, his judgment clouded by something Marcus couldn't name. Fear, prejudice, or both. The situation escalated in a heartbeat. Hensley yanked Marcus to his feet and slammed him against the side of the truck, the metallic clang ringing out in the night. Before Marcus could react, Hensley's fist connected with his face, a brutal blow that sent him reeling. Blood trickled from a cut on his cheek, and his vision blurred. The world seemed to slow, the hum of the highway fading into a distant hum. A small crowd began to gather, drivers pulling into the lot, drawn by the commotion. Among them was Mrs. Clara Bennett, an elderly woman whose hands trembled as she pulled out her phone to record the scene. She had been driving home from visiting her granddaughter when she stumbled upon this nightmare. Her heart ached for the young man in uniform, and her resolve hardened. This moment would not go unwitnessed. Hensley, oblivious to the growing audience, continued to bark orders, his voice rising with each word. Marcus, slumped against the truck, clutched his face, his mind racing. A turning point. Clara's advocacy, coupled with the viral video, turned the tide. She contacted a civil rights attorney, who arrived at the precinct ready to fight for Marcus. News outlets picked up the story, and protesters gathered outside, holding signs demanding justice. Under mounting pressure, Marcus was released later that day, greeted by cheers from supporters who had rallied to his cause. As he stepped into the sunlight, Marcus felt a mix of relief and exhaustion. The road ahead was still long, but he was not alone. Clara and her allies had ensured that his story would not be buried. Climbing into a borrowed vehicle, Marcus resumed his journey, determined to fulfill his promise to Daniel. The story continued to spread, sparking national conversations about race, respect, and the treatment of veterans. Marcus, though reluctant to be in the spotlight, agreed to speak at a veterans' hall, where he shared his story with quiet strength. "This isn't about me," he said. "It's about Daniel and every soldier who's ever been treated unfairly." His words moved the audience to tears, forging a bond of solidarity. Hensley, meanwhile, faced growing scrutiny. Suspended without pay, he sat alone in his apartment, haunted by his actions. Seeking guidance, he met with Lieutenant Colonel Harold Jenkins, a retired Marine who had mentored him years ago. Jenkins's words were blunt. "You dishonored 2 soldiers that night. You need to make this right." For the first time, Hensley felt the weight of his mistake, not just as a professional failure, but as a betrayal of everything he claimed to stand for. The storm breaks. The night enveloped the rural highways of North Carolina in a shroud of stillness, broken only by the steady drone of a military truck's engine. Corporal Marcus Hayes gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles taut, his eyes fixed on the ribbon of asphalt stretching into the darkness. The weight of his mission bore down on him like a physical force, heavy and unrelenting. In the truck's cargo hold rested a polished mahogany casket, draped with the stars and stripes of an American flag, carrying the remains of Private Daniel Ruiz, a soldier, a friend, a brother. Marcus wasn't just transporting a body. He was fulfilling a sacred duty to bring his fallen comrade home. Marcus and Daniel had forged a bond deeper than most could understand, tempered in the crucible of war. They had shared foxholes in distant lands, laughed during fleeting moments of reprieve, and leaned on each other when the world seemed to crumble under the weight of conflict. Daniel's infectious optimism, his ability to find light in the darkest corners, had always steadied Marcus. Now, that light was extinguished, snuffed out by a war that had taken too much from too many. Marcus's mission was clear: deliver Daniel to his family with the honor and dignity he deserved. As the miles ticked by, Marcus's mind wandered through memories. He recalled Daniel's hearty laugh, echoing through a dusty barracks, the way his eyes sparkled when he spoke of his family back home, and the quiet courage he displayed in the face of danger. Those moments felt like a lifetime ago, yet they were as vivid as the headlights cutting through the night. "I'll get you home, brother," Marcus whispered, glancing at the rearview mirror where the flag-draped casket lay in silent repose. The words were a vow, a promise to a man who could no longer hear them. The hours stretched on, and fatigue began to claw at Marcus's edges. His eyelids grew heavy, his shoulders stiff from hours behind the wheel. Spotting a flickering neon sign that read "Open" at a desolate gas station on the outskirts of a small town, he decided to stop. The lot was empty, the air cool and crisp, carrying the faint scent of pine from the surrounding woods. Marcus parked the truck with care, ensuring the flag remained undisturbed, and stepped out to stretch his aching limbs. The silence was almost oppressive, broken only by the occasional chirp of crickets and the hum of the station's lights. Inside, a bored cashier flipped through a dog-eared magazine, barely acknowledging Marcus as he paid for fuel. The transaction was quick, routine, and Marcus was eager to get back on. Marcus, sensing the officer's approach, straightened and reached for his military ID. "Evening, sir," he said, his voice calm but tinged with exhaustion. "I'm Corporal Marcus Hayes, escorting a fallen soldier home." He held out his ID, expecting a nod of acknowledgement, perhaps even respect. But Hensley's gaze was cold, his expression unyielding. To him, Marcus, a young black man in a military uniform, standing beside a truck in the dead of night, didn't fit the picture of innocence. "What's your business here?" Hensley demanded, his tone sharp and accusatory. Marcus repeated himself, gesturing toward the fuel pump. "Just refueling, sir. I'm on a mission to bring a soldier home." But Hensley's suspicion only deepened. Without warning, he grabbed Marcus's arm, yanking him forward with a force that sent a jolt of shock through the corporal's body. "Don't move!" Hensley barked, his hand hovering near his holster. Marcus froze, his heart pounding. "Sir, there's no need for this," he said, struggling to keep his voice steady. "I'm just doing my job." But Hensley wasn't listening. What began as a routine stop was spiraling into something dangerous, something neither man could fully control. The night, once quiet, now crackled with tension, and Marcus sensed that this encounter would leave marks far deeper than any bruise.